Welcome everyone, I am Snehashis, your biology teacher. Today I will describe about the sexual reproduction of flower. See, the flower is a place where the sexual organs of the plant is present. If we talk about the male part of the flower, we will say about stamen, and if we say about the female part of that flower, we will talk about pistil. First of all, I am telling about stamen. Stamen has two parts, that is anther and filament, and if we cut the anther, we can see there is 4 chambers, because there are 2 anthers. In each anther we have 2 chambers, so if we cut the entire anther, we will see the 4 chamber. And what are that chamber? We call it sac. In that sac we can find the pollen grains, the powdery structure. The powdery part is known as pollen grains, and within that pollen grains we can find the germ cells. So here we can find the male part of the plant, that is male germ cell within the pollen grain. The pollen grain is present within the pollen sac, and the pollen sac is present within the anther, and the anther is the part of the stamen. Now let us talk about the pistil. Pistil is the female part of the flower. Female part means where the main fertilization occurs. Female part is known as carpel, or we can say pistil. It has 3 parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Stigma is the receptor of the pollen grains. Style is the path from where the germ cells makes the tube, and finally it will meet the ovule or the egg of the female. So apart from this, flower had different parts. The colored part is called petals, and the green part is called sepals, and you can see the all other parts like pedicels. Then we can see receptacles. So I will move to the main part. See, if we call what is a flower, it is an organ of sexual reproduction. Without the flower, sexual reproduction cannot happen, cannot be occur with the help of this flower. It has sepals, it has petals, it has stamens, it has carpels. Stamens and carpels are reproductive parts of the flower which contains germ cells. Stamens is the male part, whereas the carpel is the female part. Now, if we talk about the flower, sexuality of the flower, there are 2 types of flower, that is unisexual flower and bisexual flower. Unisexual flower means the flower which contains only one sex. One sex means either there is a male flower or there will be female flower. The unisexual plant are like papaya plant, watermelon plant. Now the flower which contains both the sexes, that is it will contain stamen, it will contain pistil, like hibiscus flower. It is known as bisexual flower. So the male part is called pistil, and the female part is called carpel. Male part is called stamen and the female part is called the carpel or the pistil. Carpel or pistil have stigma, style and ovary. Ovary is the enlarged part of the female organ, enlarged structure at the base of the carpel or pistil where the ovules are located. It will become the fruit after fertilization. The ovary becomes the fruit, whereas the ovule becomes the seed. Now, stigma is where the pollen sticks to. Style is the long tube which connects the stigma to the ovary. Now, the anther. Look at the picture. Anther is that part of the stamen which produces the pollen grains, and the filament is a stalk-like structure that holds the anther. Pollen grains is also known as male gametophyte, which contains the male gametes. Now, what are the steps in sexual reproduction? First of all, there will be pollination, then germination of the pollen grains in that tube, in the style part, and then fertilization. Fertilization means fusion of that male part with the female part. Then after that, the last step is formation of fruit and seed. So we have 4 steps in sexual reproduction: pollination, germination of pollen grains, fertilization and formation of fruits and seeds. Now, what is pollination? Pollination means transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the flower. And then we can say there are 2 types of pollination. Before that, I will tell you what is the need of pollination. Because if the pollination will not occur, the gamete will not fuse with the egg. And if it will not fuse, there will be no fertilization, there will be no zygote formation. So, it is very essential step where the pollen grains will move from anther to stigma. Otherwise, the formation of the zygote will not happen. Now, what are the types of pollination? We have 2 types of pollination. Like, if the pollen grains jumps from the flower of the same flower, it is known as self-pollination. And if the pollen grains travels to different flower, it is known as cross-pollination. So cross-pollination is very much essential, as because the variety of the flower, variety of the plants will develop. So we have 2 types of pollination, self-pollination and cross-pollination. See, the cross-pollination have the advantages because it maintains the gene pool. But it requires some of the agents to get transferred from different flower, either of the same plant or of the different plant. Because see, if we talk about self-pollination, the anther of the pollen grains will transfer from anther to the stigma of the same plant. It will not. The chances are high of the transfer. The chances are high to fuse the gametes. Whereas if we talk about cross-pollination, the chances is less. So there must be some agent which helps in the transfer of these pollen grains. So what are these agents? There are wind, insects, birds, bats, etc. See, wind. If we talk about wind, the flower must be feathery, the pollen grains must be feathery, must be of light weight. Then only it will move with the flow of the wind, and it will get transferred to the stigma of another flower. Now, if we talk about insect pollinated flower, the flower must give some rewards to the insects, otherwise it will not come. What are these rewards? It may be in the form of nectar, it may be in the form of they give some place to stay there, anything, any reward. In that attraction, the insect comes to that flower and it moves from flower to flower to collect nectar or something else, and from the body parts of that insect, the pollen grains get transferred to another flower. Like this, birds also transfer those pollen grains. So these are the agents with which the pollen grains get transferred from anther to stigma of different flower, which gives a genetic diversity in the plants. Cross pollination is very much essential for the survival of the plants, for the survival of not only the plant, for survival of the new species. Now, after this pollination, what happens? After the pollen grains land on the suitable stigma, it reaches the ovule, female gamete present in the ovary. It forms a tube which is known as pollen tube. It travels through the style, then it reaches to the ovary, where it fuses with the egg cells, fuses with the synergids, fuses with the polar nuclei. I will make some detailed video of this part. In this video, I am telling about the overall concept of this sexual reproduction. See, the pollen grains, one germ cell fuses with that polar nuclei, which is of two nucleus. That is why it is known as polar nuclei. And another germ cell fuses with the egg. So this type of reproduction is known as this type of fertilization is known as double fertilization. See, the polar nuclei, after fusion with the germ cell, it develops into endosperm, which provides the nutrition to the developing embryo. And the embryo forms by the fusion of that egg cell with one of the germ cell. See, this happens after after the pollination, then tube formation, then fusion, that is fertilization. The fertilization occurs in two parts, that is polar nuclei and those egg cells. That is why it is known as what? It is known as double fertilization. Now, moving to the next part, fertilization. So we have discussed that it is the fusion of male and female gamete inside the ovule. So after fertilization, what happens? The zygote divides several times to form an embryo with the ovule. The ovule develops a tough coat and gradually converted into seeds. The ovary grows to form fruits. Sepals, petals, stigma, style all falls down from the flower. See, what is double fertilization? One sperm nucleus fertilizes the egg, producing zygote, that is 2N, which becomes embryo inside the cell, inside the seed. Another sperm or the germ cell fuses with the polar nuclei, resulting in triploid endosperm. Endosperm is a source of food. I have discussed earlier also, it is a source of food for the young embryo. See, we consume the water of that coconut, what is it? It is the endosperm. Plant doesn't make for us, it makes for us that embryo, that developing seed. See, structure of the seed. See, if we give focus on the seed, we have two types of seeds, that is monocot seeds and dicot seeds. First of all, I will describe what is seed. Seed has two parts, that is a plumule, which is shoot system, which generates shoot system, because seed is the baby plant, where the plumule parts gives the shoot system, whereas the radical parts gives the root system. Now, when these seeds gets proper nutrition, it will develop into a young plant. It will develop into new plant, and after it gets maturation, it again comes to the sexual reproduction phase, and again it will reproduce, and gives new organism. See, this chapter has a lot of detailed thing which cannot be summed up in this video. I will make separate video detailing of every part. So this chapter I am ending up here, the overview of the sexual reproduction of the flowering plant. Hope you like the video. If you have any query, ask in comment box, and I will try to give every possible answer of your questions. Thank you.